Hoi hoi, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So here we go, we have yet another retro handheld to unbox. But this one is very different and very unexpected, not just because of its existence, but also because of the company that made it. This is a little device called the Logitech G Cloud. And this is a corpo console. This is made by Logitech, the company that is best known for keyboards, mice, and all those other computer accessories that you used to. But here we are with an Android-powered device that is actually supposed to be dedicated for cloud gaming. And while that is where this device definitely excels, it's also a fairly competent emulation device. And the screen, battery life, and ergonomics actually made this the gaming device that I never knew I needed, but definitely the gaming device we all deserve. And not every device is perfect, so while this device is surprisingly good, there are some caveats that keep it from being great, especially compared to other Android handhelds on the market today. So it's time for an in-depth review. It's time to figure out what makes this device tick, what it does great, and what it could improve on. So grab a cup of coffee, saddle up, and let's get to work. Alright, so let's start with an unboxing. We're going to grab our trusty knife here, and we're going to see what we have in the packaging. And right off the bat, you are greeted with the device itself front and center, so you get a glimpse at that nice big screen, and you can get a feel for the size of it. And it is surprisingly light. Quite frankly, for somebody who uses the Steam Deck as his main, I was overall shocked by how light and ergonomic that device was on picking it up for the first time. Once you open the box and take the system out, you'll find a smaller box inside with everything you'll need. You'll get the charging plug, a USB-C to USB-A cable, and further in the box, you'll also get a beginner's manual and you'll get a Logitech G sticker. And the sticker itself actually looks pretty cool. That needs to get stuck on something. The manual itself is pretty straightforward. It just gives you system components, what all the buttons do, and it's in different languages as well. And then, of course, on the other side, you actually have your charging plug. Now, if there's one thing I learned from trying to replace a wall outlet, I am no electrician by any way, shape, or form. So the Logitech power adapter has the following specs printed on that. So hopefully one of you out there will find this information useful, but I can also tell you that I can charge the Logitech G Cloud with a regular Nintendo Switch charger. So that's it for what comes in the box, so let's take a look at the device itself. On the front, you have a 7-inch screen with very thin bezels around it. You have your face buttons, your two analog sticks that click L3 and R3, and then you also have a home button, a Logitech G button, and a start and select button on the top. And the buttons, for the most part, do feel very comfortable. The D-pad gets a little bit of criticism for its design because it's kind of curved on the ends, which can affect performance during games like fighting games where you need to pull off Hadoukens and that type of thing. But in my experience, I didn't really have a problem with it. The only real problem that I had was with these start and select buttons. They are a little too close to the top and they're kind of recessed into the device, so they can be a little bit hard to reach and even harder to push in when you need them. But overall, I do have to say everything does seem nice and comfy. On the top of the device, you have your stacked shoulder buttons, as well as your power, sleep, wake switch, and you have a slot at the top here for a micro SD card. Now, the micro SD cards can only be formatted to FAT32, which can cause an issue if you want to emulate bigger systems. And the only real complaint I have about the shoulder buttons is the triggers have a little bit too much travel for my taste, but that's because I've been spoiled by my Xbox Elite controller. But the bumpers are nice and clicky and do a good job. And on the bottom of the device, you have two downward-facing stereo speakers, a headphone jack, and the USB-C charging port. Now, the charging port is only capable of charging. You cannot do video out on this device. However, you can use the USB-C port for data transfer. So let's quickly write our mount into SpecTown here. We have a Snapdragon 720G octa-core CPU, which caps out at 2.3 gigahertz. We also have 64 gigabytes internal memory and an SD card slot capable of FAT32 formatted SD cards. We also have a beautiful 1920 by 1080 7-inch IPS LCD screen that does seem to be OCA laminated. And the screen is capable of a 60 Hz refresh rate. We have Wi-Fi 5 on board and Bluetooth 5.1 and a pretty beefy battery here, 23.1 watt hours, that brags about 12 hours of battery life. Let's do some quick size comparisons here. Let's start out with the small devices. Obviously, the Logitech Cloud is not going to be as small and as compact as the Miu Mini, and yet it's still a lot smaller than the G Cloud. As you could see here, the RG351V doesn't even cover the screen of the G Cloud. And just for good measure, we'll also throw in the RG353V as well. So if you wanted something that was a little bit more pocketable than the G Cloud, then these three devices might be a better option for you. Same thing with this device here, the RG353P. Now this device is also much more pocketable, but on top of that you have stacked shoulder buttons, and you can dual boot into Android and Linux. So theoretically this is a cheaper, more pocketable device that is capable of cloud gaming as well. And while we're talking about pocketable devices, let's talk about this device here, the Retroid Pocket 3. So here we have yet another pocketable cloud gaming device that runs on Android, and you'll notice the price point is $250 less than that of the Logitech G Cloud. However, I don't find these smaller devices particularly as ergonomic. However, I do find the D-pad on the Retroid Pocket 3 to be superior, and on top of that, because of the smaller screen, you'll have tighter pixels, which will make for a better retro gaming experience. Alright, so that's it for the little guys, so now let's get to the big boys. Here is the Anbernic Win600, which as of this recording, the price has dropped down to about $300 if you order from Anbernic's website. And so you are paying a little bit less to get a Windows-powered device. However, with that, you're also getting a chunkier, less ergonomic device with poorer battery life. However, that said, you can adjust the TDP on the Anbernic Win600 to vary or get a little bit more out of that battery, which could help you if you're more focused on cloud gaming. However, I would not recommend cloud gaming on the Win600 just due to the poor ergonomics and the analog stick placement. Next, we have the Anbernic RG552, and I have very similar complaints about the 552 that I have with the Win600, that being the poor ergonomics and the analog sticks at the bottom. However, that said, the 552 is phenomenal for retro gaming as it has one of the best non-OLED screens out there. The screen resolution is actually optimized for 4x3 gaming as well as 3x2 gaming on the Game Boy Advance. And theoretically, because this can dual boot Android and Linux, you could cloud game on this as well. However, I would only recommend this device if you're interested in playing older systems, and even then, there are cheaper options out there. Now let's go to the Ion Odin Pro. And this is where it actually gets really hard to recommend the G Cloud, considering the Odin Pro is now on sale for $328, and you can get it in 3 to 5 working days according to their website. If I were making this video a few months ago where the company was having trouble fulfilling their backers and their pre-orders, we would be having a very different discussion right now. the only way in which the Logitech G Cloud wins over the Pro is in the screen size and the ergonomics. I don't necessarily like the start and select button placement on the Odin Pro, however, the Odin Pro has a much better D-pad. And it is a much more powerful Android handheld at a comparable price to the G Cloud. And so let's end our comparison with the chonky boy, the Valve Steam Deck. Now, obviously, the Steam Deck is the one to beat just because of its price to performance. The Steam Deck can handle quite a bit, up to and including Switch emulation, but it's also a big boy. It's probably not really meant for travel, and you can get tired holding this device for long periods of time. And as much as I love my Steam Deck, this is my primary device, there have actually been times where I have been too tired to hold this device at night, and I've been able to pick up the G Cloud and remote connect it to my desktop computer and have very similar gameplay experiences in a much lighter form factor. However, for somebody who doesn't want to have multiple handhelds like me and wants to have just one, it's really hard to suggest the G Cloud over the Steam Deck because you can get a 64 gigabyte Steam Deck for only $50 more. However, it is worth noting that you can get the G Cloud now on Amazon and have it within a couple of days. And the only Steam Deck in stock right now is the $529 250 gig model, and that will take up to 2 weeks to get to you. At time of recording, the 64 gigabyte Steam Deck is back ordered until January, March at the latest. Alright, let's do our initial boot up and setup of this device. Now, this setup will be just like any other Android device that's out there. You put your email, your Wi-Fi network, all that fun stuff. So I'm not going to necessarily bore you with all that. As a matter of fact, I put out a whole video a couple of weeks ago on setting up Android-based devices. And setting up this device will be no different, so I'll leave a link to that video in the description. However, I do want to go over the two different front ends that this device offers, one being a regular tablet mode and the other being a handheld mode. So we'll start with the handheld mode first, which will bring you through a tutorial on some of the buttons and actually encourage you to use the buttons over the touchscreen. And the tutorial makes it very apparent that this is a cloud gaming device. Now, the handheld mode does come preloaded with a whole bunch of cloud gaming services, including GeForce Now, Xbox Cloud Gaming, and Steam Link, but it also has the Chrome browser, YouTube, and the Google Play Store. So thankfully, you don't have to run any type of custom image to download your own apps and front ends. It'll all come baked right into this device. And you do have some limited touchscreen support, as well as the ability to check your notifications through the Messages tab up at the top. And all your system notifications will be up there, as well as tips and notifications from Logitech. However, it's a little bit convoluted on how to clear them. You have to select them all and then click delete. Now you also get a settings application on the top left, which is how you can set up your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth. You have a couple of themes to choose from, but nothing too crazy. And you have a couple of options for battery saver mode, as well as to find out how much battery you have remaining and what the battery temperature actually is. You can also remap the controller's buttons as necessary. And if needed, you are able to get into the regular Android settings by going into more settings and Android settings. So if there's anything additional you needed to address, you can do it right there. Now, unfortunately, this gaming mode is very bare bones, so I actually prefer to use the regular tablet mode. And there is an app that allows you to bounce back and forth. But in tablet mode, you can access the multitasking tray as well as swiping down from the top to access your quick settings. And those are both features that are not in the handheld mode. Plus, this also gives you the option to change your front end if you so choose, and we're going to do that a little bit later in this video. But for now, let's get into some gaming, and we're going to start with cloud gaming because this is what this device is meant to do. And so let's start with NVIDIA GeForce Now. And we're actually going to try out Genshin Impact. This is a game you can download on the Android side, but the Logitech G Cloud does not have a key mapper, and the Android version of Genshin does not yet have controller support. But Genshin Impact is an online-only game, so this makes it worth checking out on this platform. And one of the things that really keeps me from enjoying Genshin Impact is that every time I play it, I have to wait for stuff to download to my device. But using GeForce Now, even with a free account, all of a sudden this no longer becomes an issue and I can jump right into the game. And so something like the Logitech G Cloud may actually get me to want to spend time playing this game. Mostly because it's not eating up space on my hard drive, and on top of that, we're running at 60 frames per second, and it looks really darn good. You would not even notice here on my home network that I'm streaming this. Now, there are not a lot of games in my Steam library that are compatible with GeForce Now at time of recording, but I was able to pull up Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, and this works well on my home network as well. Now, GeForce Now was offering a sale for $30 for 6 months, so I am currently streaming this at a paid tier. But there is a free tier of GeForce Now that does come with some limitations if you are willing to try it out. However, I can't say here that my experience with this particular game was perfect. For example, I was not able to change my controller configurations or use any of the controller presets for my Steam account. It just wouldn't let me do it. And the touchscreen controls were also a little wonky. I didn't really have a way of controlling a mouse. So I wouldn't necessarily play this specific game using GeForce Now, but if a game does have built-in controller support, you should be okay. Now, I only tested out one game for Xbox Game Pass just due to limited time, and I decided to go all the way back to where my Xbox experience first started with Fable Anniversary, and I didn't have any problems. Everything seemed pretty smooth to me. But I'll let some footage play just so you can get an idea of what to expect with Xbox Game Pass. Just keep in mind this is all dependent on your internet connection. Moving on to local streaming, I was able to use Moonlight to connect to my desktop PC in my house, and I was able to play Final Fantasy XIV. All of the controller buttons were recognized, the interface popped up as the controller interface, and everything ran buttery smooth. In fact, I'm actually finding myself enjoying this game more on this device than on the Steam Deck. And most of that has to do with the screen size and resolution more fitting that of a computer monitor. So as long as my internet connection holds out, everything here just looks and feels better. Moving on to emulation, we're going to stick with just the high-end systems because your 8, 4, and 16 gigabyte systems will work just fine. But if you want to get into more advanced territory like the 3DS, you are going to have some struggle. For example, here's Pokemon Omega Ruby running on Citra Enhanced at a 1x resolution, and this game is just running like hot garbage. We're barely getting 20 frames per second here, and because we're at a 1x resolution, it doesn't look the best. And so now let's do this same test, but with a different version of Citra. Here's Citra MMJ. And we do get slightly better performance here. We do actually get up to a max of 25 frames per second, which is a small improvement, but not enough for me to consider this system playable. Now, your mileage may vary depending on what games you play, but I did not have a lot of luck in my testing, which is kind of a disappointment because when you take another system like the Ion Odin, which not only has a better Snapdragon processor, but it also has a performance mode that you can kick on. And when you do that, you can bump this up to a 2x resolution and get that sharper image as well as good performance. We're playing at nearly full speed here. And so when it comes down to it, if you were looking to play 3DS games on your Logitech G Cloud, you're probably going to end up disappointed. And you may want to consider a device like the Odin Pro instead, because the Odin is the first device outside of an actual 3DS that I have actually wanted to play 3DS games on. However, if your cap is with Nintendo DS, you'll actually be just fine. Now, I'm actually playing here at a 1x resolution, so things do look a little bit muddy in my footage here, but you should be able to bump this up to at least a 2x resolution and not see any dips in performance. N64 is another system that you shouldn't have any problem with. I'm only playing here at default settings, but you should be able to up the resolution as needed here. You should be able to get up to 720p. And it's always nice when testing out a system and doing the obligatory God of War test for PSP allows me to bump things up to a 2x resolution and still get a full 60 frames per second. It's just a good sign that you're going to get decent performance out of a handheld. Moving on to GameCube, I'm still having trouble with Paper Mario Thousand Year Door on Android devices using Dolphin MMJR. I'll get through this opening sequence and the title will appear on the screen, and then all of a sudden the emulator will just completely crash. Now this happened on the Odin as well, so I'm starting to think that maybe this may be a me problem. So I'm going to have to try to get my hands on a different ROM set so I can better test this game. It could also have something to do with it being the PAL version of the game. So if you're having trouble with this game on Android devices, please let me know in the comments below. However, I do have to say running other GameCube games on this emulator was a dream on the Logitech Cloud. Sonic Adventure DX is a perfect example of this because this game ran at a full 60 frames per second, and even at default settings just looked gorgeous. This was the first time I had ever played the first Sonic Adventure, and I just find that the visual of this remaster absolutely trumps the original Dreamcast version. Unfortunately, the same can't really be said for Sonic Adventure 2. While the game did look gorgeous, it just kept stuttering and it did have some slowdown. So with this device, I can't really say that GameCube is going to run perfectly 100% of the time, but you will find a good chunk of the library playable. Now, I would also consider any PlayStation 2 games that do run well on this device a pleasant surprise. Using the Ether SX2 app, you are not necessarily going to get your Ratchet and Clanks and your Jack and Daxters, but you will get a couple of deep cuts that Retro Tech Dad might recommend in his channel. Like Gradius 5 here, this runs very well on the Logitech G Cloud, but this is a very easy PS2 game to emulate at default settings. But yet, here we are playing a PS2 game on the Logitech G Cloud, so there is hope for some titles out there.
Come on, we're just getting started. Please continue. This is Big Viper T301. Commencing attack on.
And finally, some light Android gaming is possible on this device so long as the game has native controller support. Horizon Chase here ran like a dream, but I did need to go into the settings and switch from touchscreen to controller for my interface. And then once I did that, I didn't have trouble playing this game at all. However, other games like Crossy Road that also have controller support just didn't seem to recognize most of the controller inputs, try as I might, so I ended up having to use the touchscreen to attempt to navigate this game. Which is a shame because I clearly remember this game working on my other Android devices, so I'm not sure what it is about the G Cloud that struggled with this game. And again, there's no key mapping software here, so I'm just out of luck when it comes to using this specific game. But most games I tested that had built-in controller support did in fact work. Here's the Android version of Dead Cells, and this game is working just fine. I didn't have to tweak or adjust anything to get the controller to work out of the box. One last thing I wanted to point out is that I settled on the Daigisho Frontend, which works darn well on the G Cloud and allows me to have a more game-centric interface and still be able to access my notification bar as well as my multitasking bar. So if you're looking for a decent front end, definitely give this one a try. Alright, let's talk about commendations and condemnations with this device, and we'll start with commendations. The first one being that this device actually has really good battery life. I've maybe only charged this thing twice since I've gotten it, and every time I pick it up after it's been sitting for a couple of days, it always seems to have plenty of battery life left, which makes this a very decent emulation device because you'll be able to play those lower end systems like NES, SNES, and Game Boy for hours on end, and you'll barely see a dip in the battery life of this device. Which also makes it great for cloud gaming depending on your internet speeds. And the same goes for local streaming in your house, which means you can not only play retro games on this device, but through the magic of the internet, you can play a few AAA titles as well. And you're going to enjoy every second of playing those titles on this wonderful, glorious 7-inch screen. And after using this device for a few weeks, I can honestly say it has a better screen than even the Steam Deck. And not only that, but because it has passive cooling, you're not going to hear any fans going off at all. And that's not even something you could say about the Nintendo Switch. But you're not going to hear a sound, and the system itself is nice and comfortable. It's ergonomically one of the best systems I have held in my hands to date. And to me, that's a great combination. A comfortable handheld with a great screen and good battery life that can play a whole mess of games. But no device is perfect, so let's get into Condemnations. And just a couple of missteps here. I don't understand why we can only format our SD cards to FAT32, and I don't know why they didn't include a key mapper here for Android games, considering this is an Android device. And while I was disappointed with the poor 3DS performance on the Logitech Cloud, I'm even more disappointed that this system is $350. While it has a lot of positives, there are cheaper devices out there, as well as more powerful devices that are around the same price point. So that said, I have a lot of concern that this device will fail at that current price point. However, you have to keep in mind there are gamers out there that are strictly cloud gamers, and in that respect, this device might be exactly what they're looking for. And that's really what the focus of this device is, and why Logitech chose the specs and the design that they did. However, being able to emulate and run some Android games on this is a bonus. So let me know what you think of this device in the comments below, and feel free to continue the conversation in the Steam Machine Discord. Link will be in the description, and Team Retroke is now part of the Steam Machine Productions. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.